Okay, um, I really am kind of sad about this article because now I was hoping that, that I wouldn't really see something recently about the Parkland incident that happened in Florida, the school shooting at the high school. And so it brought out a lot of people to protest against gun violence. And so, what I found that was really disturbing is it's exactly what it is. It's an article by a Jeffrey Lord, and really, starting to have mixed feelings about this whole thing. I did do a video about how I was suspicious about the media and how they were painting and the way they do it is the whole to the point to where now these teens are being attacked on every level on social media. They're altering their photos. There's a lot of cruel people out there, but what's even crueler about this situation is I'm going to read this article, and it's a whole nother perspective about this incident and these teens. And I don't know these kids. I don't know these kids personally, but what I ran across an article, and I'm gonna start reading it. Okay, it it's entitled "At the March and Admission," and so this is called "Another Perspective" by Spectator.org, and it's called "The Parkland Students Bullied the Shooter." And so I'm going to read the article. It says, "Yes," said Parkland student Emma González. She and her fellow students at Parkland, Marjory, Stoneman, Douglas High, ostracized the fellow student Nikolas Cruz, said Gonzalez when speaking in Washington at the anti-gun rally March for Our Lives. So since he was in middle school, it was no surprise to anyone who knew him that he was the shooter. So those talking about how we should have not ostracized him, you didn't know this kid, okay? We did. Okay, so this is a quote from one of the teens, and I'm assuming it's going to made a startling admission. Parkland students actually bullied the shooter. And so his analysis is right. The rest of us didn't know him. But there are a large number of people, some of whom are celebrities and either marched in or supported the March for Our Lives rally, who have spent years insisting that what Gonzalez and her friends who ostracized Nikolas Cruz did was bullying. So take actress Deborah Messing. Messing is listed on this site called Stomp Out Bullying. The site describes itself as follows: Stomp Out Bullying, a national anti-bullying and cyberbullying program for kids and teens, is a signature program of Love Our Children USA, the national nonprofit leader in fighting violence against children since 1999. Created in 2005, Stomp Out Bullying focuses on reducing and preventing bullying, cyberbullying, sexting, and other digital abuse, educating against homophobia, racism, and hatred, decreasing school absenteeism, and deterring violence in schools, online, and in communities across the country. So it teaches effective solutions on how to respond to all forms of bullying, as well as educating kids and teens in schools and online, providing help for those in need and at risk of suicide, raising awareness, peer mentoring programs in schools, public service announcements by noted celebrities, and social media campaigns. And additional focus educates parents on how to keep their children safe and responsible online. Fair enough. They are opposed to bullying and support educating kids and teens in school and online, providing help for those in need and at risk of suicide, all to the good. But now look at this tweet from Messing. I stand with the brave, indomitable kids who galvanize a nation, a world, and did not take inaction as an answer. You have to put the adults in DC to shame. CS gun laws will finally be enacted, and you will be the heroes of the generation. Today, you will lead us. Hashtag March for Our Lives. And it has Deborah Messing, at Deborah Messing, March 24th, 2018. Again, to be fair, Messing has no more idea what went on in the day-to-day life of Parkland High School than any other outsider. But it is striking that her first reaction to support the kids completely contradicts the stated objective to stomp out bullying program, which she also supports. So for as we all know, there on the platform at the march is one of the Parkland students turned anti-gun activist, blurting out to the world, well, yes, the peers of Nikolas Cruz in their common high school bullied him by ostracizing him, and who knows what else they did to him. And the excuse, well, the rest of us didn't know him, you see, and per González, if we did, we would know Nikolas Cruz deserved to be ostracized. He deserved to be bullied. Okay. The immediate aftermath of the shooting in which Cruz took 17 lives, the TC Palm of the USA Today network. Okay. Florida school shooting student knew Cruz. I could have said something to the administrators. These are like statements that students made where they could have mentioned the signs of the kid having odd behavior or giving them signs, alerting them that something was wrong. They could have reported. So Marolo Alvarez remembers students taunting Nikolas Cruz. Okay, this is another student at the school that remembers the taunting. So he looked like a school shooter, Alvarez said students used to say about him. So they basically bullied him and called him a school shooter. This is before he actually became an actual shooter. So Alvarez, who spoke to reporters at a vigil for victims of the area's second mass shooting in 13 months, said he wishes he had said something much earlier. I could have said something to administrators that, hey, this kid, he gets bullied a lot. Please help him. Please reach out to him. I kind of regret not doing that, Alvarez has said. Okay, so they totally didn't really say that much about this. And so catch that. Nikolas Cruz wasn't just bullied, he was bullied a lot. Okay, so now nobody is going to blame Alvarez, an 11th grader. He at least had the thought that he should say something. But all these kids who are now momentary celebrities and out there with more than a whiff of self-righteous blaming the NRA, one has to wonder who among them bullied Nikolas Cruz. González admits to it. What about David Hogg? So Emma González is not the person that you see here that you would assume is innocent in all of this. She may be frightened at the fact that this kid actually carried out something they bullied him about. Maybe they didn't take him serious, but she's not this sweet person from this article. She's not the person that people would think that she is. And it isn't just her. From what this article is saying, that there were several kids at the high school that bullied this kid and actually called him and labeled him the school shooter. And so this kid was bullied and targeted by his peers to the point to where he actually carried out what they had taunted him about being an active school shooter. So this is pretty sad to see an article like this and to hear that it got to this point and actually he carried out this horrible deed. So we can't ignore the issue of gun control that this tragedy raises. And so I'm asking, no, demanding we take action now. Why? Because at the end of the day, the students at my school felt one shared experience. Our politicians abandoned us by failing to keep guns out of schools. But this time, my classmates and I are going to hold them to account, or accountability, of course. This time, we are going to be pressuring them to take action. This time, we're going to force them to spend more energy protecting human lives than unborn fetuses. Well, aside from the appalling notion, part of the left-wing canon, that unborn babies are not human lives, note that Kamsky and doubtless his friends are intent on holding other people to accountability, politicians, but nowhere are they saying that maybe, just maybe, they need to have a good long look at the nearest mirror and ask themselves what 11th grader Alvarez is asking, which is, could they have done more? Were any of them, as Emma González admits, participating in ostracizing Nikolas Cruz? Were any of these kids in any way bullying Nikolas Cruz? All too often, Americans see stories where some bullied kid feels so set upon by his or her peers that they commit suicide. So Nikolas Cruz effectively committed suicide by killing 17 people, most of them students' peers. He will face a death penalty, and one would think he will get it. But the problem undiscussed is at the rally the other day was the responsibility of Cruz's peers themselves in not taking the stomp out bullying message into their own hearts and practice. So instead, as Emma González freely admits, they did exactly what so many celebrities like Deborah Messing and others say they are so passionate about, stomping out bullying. They bullied this kid and taunted him, Nikolas Cruz, the shooter, because, like he deserved it. What they said, what the kids that bullied him said. He was so weird. So this was what these kids were doing to this kid to ignite him to be who he was. So the really sad part is that this was just another day in high school where, since forever, the popular kids sneer at the geeks and the nerds and the weirdos. But this wasn't the case. In this case, it was something terrible that happened behind all of this. The kids blamed the politicians for their troubles, and no adult blinked. And so this story has not really gotten that much attention. More attention has been given on these kids and the sensationalism of this movement of fighting gun violence. But what they're failing to disclose about this whole incident is that bullying was also a movement, and that some of these kids participated in bullying this kid whom they knew he had some specific issues. Maybe they didn't know exactly what, but they knew something was wrong. Nobody went to the office to say anything. Like the 11th grader kid he mentioned, he said he wished he had said something, but all of the other kids that were bullying him, how come they bullied him? How come? And how long did they bully him? What type of bullying did they do? It was said that they ostracized this kid. So there's some unanswered questions that they're not talking about. And that is the sad part of this whole thing, is that they're not expressing what really went on. Why would, you'd have to ask the question, investigate, why did this kid take to the school and do this heinous act? What happened before it got to this point is the questions raised. But there's an admission in this article by the number one person who's speaking out on how to fight gun violence. And so she basically admits that not only her, but there were another group of kids who ostracized Nikolas Cruz, and they actually called him a school shooter. And so he got picked on quite a bit from what this was saying in this article. So let me see if I can pull this article up at some point, as the way I'm reading it. I have read it. So it was entitled Parkland students and so it should come up easy. So now they said there's another article too they have here. Okay, so there's several conflicts of articles. So I'm more apt to believe that the article I just read was accurate, because there's a rebuttal article here that states Parkland survivor blast claim students were responsible for bullying the shooter. Weak excuse for failures of gun law. They're turning around saying that there's somebody that's saying that they didn't bully the kid. But here it says Parkland students bullied the shooter, and it was in a couple of, okay, so it's the American Spectator, and that's where I got the article. And so it says something altogether different than what we are hearing. And it's kind of sad. I hope that this isn't true, but from here that she gave an admission. Now, see, here's the thing. There probably were at the protest, I'm sure, even before the protest, these kids have been in magazines. They've been probably on talk shows by now. They've run into a lot of different reporters. And what you say to one reporter, that reporter is going to write about it the way you say it. And then when you turn around and say, oh, that's not true, I didn't mean it like that, it's too late. It's already in print. That reporter is taking notes of what you're admitting, what you're saying. So this right here says at the march and admission. So apparently, while she was at the march, whoever this person was that did this article was at the march, and they spoke to Emma González, because it says, yes, said Parkland student Emma González. She and her fellow students at Parkland Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School ostracized the fellow student Nikolas Cruz. And so it raises a lot of scary questions. And so now I'll say this, in my opinion, it doesn't give an excuse for some kid to go berserk and shoot up a school and shoot up innocent kids and take their lives. But it does raise questions as to, all of the red flag signs and what led up to this explosion of this kid's, anger and mental illness to erupt in a school, in what you would think would be a safe environment for kids. That he felt he didn't have no one that he could talk to, no one he could reach out to. No one saw the signs that this kid had some issues, that nobody spoke to anybody. There was one kid who admits, there's one kid in here, he admits that this kid was bullied. And his name is in this article. And so if you want to read this article, I'm not going to read it again, but the article is in the American Spectator. Now, there are rebuttal articles where the person or some of the kids turn around and they say, we didn't bully him. But what kids do that when they get in trouble for something, they know they did something wrong, then they turn around and they say, we didn't do it, we didn't do it. And so I'm apt to believe that there was more to the story than meets the eye, that this kid was bullied. I'm not saying that validates what he did, but it does open up a lot of, speculation as to, okay, because it's like, so many of these incidences are happening. So you'd want to know what happened before. Why did this kid go through all of the steps that he did and nobody said anything? Nobody did anything. They kind of see that within all of these different articles that people have kind of confessed about certain things about this kid, that they kind of knew him. So if they knew him and they knew he had these issues, how come nobody didn't say anything? And so those are the questions. How come nobody didn't say anything earlier if they knew him like they say they did? And the other thing is if these kids didn't bully him, why is it that this 11th grader here states specifically that this kid was taunted? He was bullied. Marolo Alvarez remembers students taunting Nikolas Cruz. So I kind of believe that this kid was not just some rogue. We know he had some problems, of course. I'm not saying he didn't have some mental illness or something wrong with him, or emotional illness, but something drove him to get to that point. And so here it's saying that the kid was bullied. And kids can be really cruel when they're in high school, and they bully a kid if he's not popular, if he's kind of off, or if he's odd, if he's not with certain cliques. There's certain groups and little little pairings, or if they're not pairings, there's groups that teenagers will form. They find friends and identity in high school, and they're at that age. And some kids are popular and others may not be as popular as others. And clearly you can see Emma González is very popular. She's got lots of friends. And it looks like she's pretty up there, you know, in terms of popularity. But for her to, you know, in this article, it says that she admits that she did some of the bullying. Now, maybe she doesn't feel that the bullying she did, if she did any bullying, she admits to that. On this article, she's admitting to it, is what it's stating. I'm just merely repeating what the article is saying. But if she bullied, maybe she felt like they just kept their distance. Even keeping your distance from someone, it says ostracize. So that's another form of bullying. You may not beat up somebody or say something to them, but by ignoring people, it's like racism, where well, you can't eat next to us in the cafeteria. We're not going to sit next to you. We don't sit, you know, just like Black people have endured where you can't eat in certain restaurants. You can't live in certain neighborhoods. You can't, you know, get in relationships with certain people. You can't send your kids to school. What that does to you emotionally, how it enrages you, it makes you feel like they're singling you out, they're pushing you away, that you're not wanted, that you're not important. And, you know, they're pretty much putting you in a real, you know, situation where you feel like nobody cares about you. They don't care what happens to you. They don't have any empathy, no sympathy for you. They treat you like an outsider. And anybody who's ever felt that feeling knows how horrible sometimes that can feel, especially if it's an ongoing situation that you have to endure day in and day out. So be a high school student and be bullied and be ostracized. You can't eat here. You can't sit there. You're not with the cool crowd. So they move away when they see you coming, or they look at your outfit, what you're wearing. If it isn't what they think is trendy, you look like, you know, in their eyes, the loser of the school. And so that treatment for teenagers who are unhinged, they don't have anyone to talk to or to reach out to, this scenario paints a whole nother picture of the story entirely. Not the way they coined it. They made it sound like he was just an emotional wreck and he had violent tendencies, and that nobody picked on him and he just decided to one day just blow up all these kids and be violent with no questions asked. Nobody spoke out and said, oh, we see this kid in the neighborhood and he's raised a few eyebrows, but nobody says anything. And this kid was bullied. I'm starting to really believe that there's more than one guilty party in all of this. And so I'm not saying that it justifies what he did at all. It doesn't. And it's sad what happened. But had a couple of things happened, if people had have talked to someone about this kid's behavior prior to this incident, maybe it could have saved lives. The other question raised is, if maybe they hadn't have bullied this kid like they did, maybe he wouldn't have went to this extreme like he did. Maybe it would have been, you know, him getting expelled and maybe a school brawl, you know, which we wouldn't hope that would happen at all, but lives wouldn't have been lost, we'd hope. It would have just been like a couple of kids squabbling and then they get expelled from school. And then you learn of this kid having some emotional issues and him getting help, you know. But For it to go out of and spin out of control to this degree and magnitude, you gotta wonder what were all of the things that led up to this point. And so I'm just merely repeating this article. Now, it has had other articles that have come out on defense of some of these kids. But I'm just saying with this article alone, and probably there's other articles that will bite back probably on this particular article, but still it raises questions. It makes you wonder. And see, the sad thing about it is that now that this situation has gotten so much press coverage and it's gotten so much notoriety, kids who did see, let's suppose kids saw the group that you see professing to want to end gun violence. They're popularized and they're sensationalized right now in media and in magazines and all of the different, arenas to get this attention and all of this turnout. But let's say that this kid was ostracized and bullied to the full extent to where it just drove him nuts. Now, we've heard stories before where kids have actually physically taken their own lives. And in a way, he did take his life because they're seeking the death penalty for him, is what I heard for Nikolas Cruz. But in him getting that, there's 17 innocent lives that were taken behind all of this. Let's say that he was bullied. Think about it. There were 17 innocent lives behind all of this that are gone now because of this bullying. If this was one of the things that prompted this kid to totally go ballistic and lose all sense of his faculties of reality and just go rogue in the school and pick off innocent lives one by one, and now he's the next one. And so I'm just saying that if you just look at this article, and you can also examine some of the other articles that will rebut this article. So I have to bring that up because there will be other articles that defend the situation. I think this article is sort of like we really don't know for sure. I'll say that. But whoever did this article, Jeffrey Lord, it's another perspective is what it says. It's an opinion piece as well, but it looks like it's possible admission. And if she's saying that she didn't say this, but they have it quoted here, sounds like maybe she was talking to a reporter and didn't even know she was talking to a reporter. And as she was talking to the reporter, he or she was taking notes of this admission, and she wasn't aware of this. And so once she learned that this reporter had gotten all this information, wrote it down, and wrote a full article, full page spread, they had to quickly come up with a way to change the story. And so they're all supporting one another in terms of saying that they didn't bully this kid. So just let's say if they did bully the kid and now they're trying to hide it. Think of all the other kids who actually saw this kid actually getting bullied, if that's what was in fact happening. They're not going to speak out now. They're afraid because they're going to be bullied too because of admitting the truth. So that is one thing to think about or consider outside of all of this, because it's this whole topic, this whole thing has became a movement for some kids, and it has become a big controversy that has blown up and has all kinds of mainstream media paying attention to this. So any kids who saw something otherwise are now feeling pressure that if they speak out against these kids, that they're going to be bullied and ostracized the same way as Nikolas Cruz was. So I just thought I would mention that. And I'm not saying this to poke fun of the incident because nothing in this is funny at all. In fact, I'm saddened by this article because if this did happen, there were 17 innocent children whose lives could have been spared. Nikolas Cruz, if someone had came forward sooner, maybe he could have gotten the help that he needed so that it wouldn't have gotten to this point. So that's basically where I'm going to leave this article. Like, comment, subscribe. Give me your thoughts on how you feel about this. It's really a sad situation. But this article does raise a lot of red flags about this whole thing, this whole incident. And, I don't think parents would be too happy to find out that these kids, if they in fact did bully the shooter, that it's a possible chance that they could have contributed to some of this craziness. That because they didn't like this kid, they didn't go to the office or to a counselor and say, well, there's this kid that we are not that crazy about. We find him to be odd, but we also find him just rather disturbing. Somebody could easily, in the confidence of maybe a school office or a room, could have spoke to an administrator. But you know how kids are. Think about it. If kids are bullying kids and they know they're doing something wrong too, do you think they're going to tell out of helping another kid that, oh, this kid is being bullied? Because then they basically be telling on themselves. And you wouldn't want to do that as a teenager, is to tell on yourself and your popularized group, your clique that you hang with in high school. So you keep all your information amongst each other. Kids don't want to snitch on one another. So it's just one thing, to see this article, but then to look at all the possibilities that could have happened that would shed it would be a whole new story entirely. But like, comment, and subscribe, and thanks for listening.